Her son texted one sentence: "We voted. You're not welcome anymore." Maggie Dawson, retired nurse and lifelong provider, didn't reply. Brian, her eldest, thought silence meant surrender. Lisa, his wife, called it closure. By morning, their mortgage would belong to her. On paper, in court, and in truth. She'd carried their debt, their dinners, their secrets. Now she was carrying the deed, and when they realized who really owned the house they boasted about, the title would speak louder than their shame. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Maggie's phone buzzes. Brian's text glows. "We voted. You're not welcome anymore." Sunday mornings used to be my soft place, a quiet window before the week started its climb again. Slow coffee, open windows, the faint sound of kids playing two houses down. But this morning, my phone buzzed once and everything stilled. Brian's name lit the screen, but it was the message that hit harder than caffeine ever could. "We voted. You're not welcome anymore." No greeting, no explanation, just a verdict. I read it twice, then a third time, slower, like I might have missed some hidden context, but the words stayed the same. I hadn't realized my hands were shaking until I saw the tiny ripples in my coffee, sloshing just enough to leave a ring on the table. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I typed back the only thing I could without losing what little dignity I still had. Understood. Send. Delivered. Read. And just like that, my brother Brian, the one who used to sneak me extra fries when Mom wasn't looking, who stood beside me at Dad's funeral like a stone, had become a stranger with a group chat. Lisa had been pulling away for months now. Every conversation came with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She'd started saying things like boundaries and emotional labor, as if I were some toxic leak she needed to contain. I just hadn't realized the slow fade was a rehearsal for this. There was a soft knock at the back door. I didn't move at first, unsure if I could pull it together fast enough. But the knock came again, followed by a voice I didn't expect to feel relieved to hear. "Mags? It's just me. Sandra." Bless her. I opened the door, and there she stood, holding a brown paper bag that smelled like cinnamon and something warm. Her eyes did a quick scan of my face. Whatever she saw made her shoulders drop. "You okay?" I stepped aside, and she walked in like she always did. No permission needed. The bag landed gently on the counter. "I brought muffins from Hilda's. Figured if you were gonna spiral, you might as well do it with carbs." I tried to laugh. Failed. "They finally did it," I said instead, voice barely above a whisper. "Sandra didn't ask who. She didn't need to. The group text." I nodded, letting the silence answer. She poured herself some coffee without asking, and sat across from me at the kitchen table like we were gearing up for a war briefing. What did they say? I turned my phone so she could read it herself. Her eyes skimmed the screen, then narrowed. "We voted?" she echoed. "Who does that to family?" I shrugged, feeling the familiar ache bloom in my chest. "Brian. Lisa. Probably Mom, too." Sandra shook her head, slow and steady. "Then they just voted themselves off your blessing list. That's how I see it." I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But I kept thinking about the Thanksgivings, the birthday voicemails, the messy group texts during football season. The little things that made us feel like a family, even when we weren't one of those picture-perfect ones. "They don't see it like that," I said quietly. "They think I'm the problem." "And when people can't handle truth," Sandra said, "they make the truth the villain." That one hit. I looked at her, really looked, and she held my gaze like she was daring me to argue. My phone buzzed again. I flinched, but it was just a calendar reminder. For Brian's daughter's school play, 3 p.m. next Saturday. I'd bought tickets weeks ago. I stared at the screen a moment longer, thumb hovering. Delete event? I tapped yes. The calendar went blank. A quiet goodbye. Sandra's voice was gentler now. You don't have to carry this alone, you know. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. But I didn't say what I was really thinking. Then why do I feel like I've already been left behind? By mid-afternoon, the house felt too still, like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do next. So I did the only thing that made sense in a moment like this. I got the boxes. They were still stacked in the garage from my last failed attempt at decluttering. Sandra watched me carry the first one in, her muffin untouched, crumbs gathering like dust beside her coffee. Mags, she said carefully, what are you doing? Just taking inventory. But she knew me too well to buy that. I started in the dining room, the one room that had always tried too hard to be impressive. I pulled the framed wedding photo off the wall, the one of Brian and Ashley standing stiffly under a rented arch. I had paid for the flowers, arranged the catering, stood with my mother in the foyer as she whispered, "You saved this day." I laid the frame gently in the bottom of the box. In the hallway cabinet, I found the baby quilt I'd sewn for Lisa's first. Each square had been stitched by hand during the hours I wasn't sleeping, back when I still thought being generous might earn me grace. That, too, went into the box. From the china cabinet, the blue-rimmed serving dish from Mom's birthday in '08. A gift from me. Into the box. Sandra leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, tracking every move. You're packing their memories? No, I said, kneeling to wrap the china in old tea towels. I'm packing mine. She didn't speak right away. Just the soft sound of the tape stretching across cardboard, then silence again. You're too calm for someone just evicted by text, she said eventually. I looked up at her. Because I've already done more for them than they'll ever know. She blinked, like she wasn't sure what I meant. I didn't explain. Not yet. There was one place left I hadn't touched in years. The locked drawer in the office. Bottom left. The label fading. Dawson Mortgage. The key still hung on the inside of my jewelry box, tucked behind the earrings I never wore anymore. I brought it down with me and knelt before the drawer like it was an altar. Click. The drawer slid open with a groan. Sandra hovered behind me now, curious but quiet. Inside were 5 neatly clipped stacks of documents, ledgers, transfer records, copies of statements. And, right in the middle, one single-page payoff confirmation, dated February 12th, signed in my name. The mortgage on Brian and Ashley's house, wiped clean. Sandra let out a low breath. You paid it off. I nodded. Last winter. They were 3 months behind and wouldn't say it out loud, but Ashley left hints. I made a few calls. Quiet ones. Jesus, Maggie. I didn't want applause. I just didn't want them to lose the house. I didn't look up. Just folded the confirmation letter down the center and slid it into my purse. All those years I'd been accused of needing to control everything. And maybe they were right. Maybe I did step in too often, solve things they hadn't asked me to solve. But never once did I hold it over them. Never once did I bring receipts. Until now. Sandra sat beside me, her hand close but not touching. You could torch them with this. Legally, emotionally. This is nuclear. I'm not interested in revenge, I said. She tilted her head. Then what is this? I closed the drawer and locked it again. Closure. We sat there for a minute, surrounded by the boxed evidence of love they'd chosen to forget. The air in the room had shifted. Not angry, not bitter, just clear. I need to drop this off somewhere, I said, standing up. The letter? I nodded. The original. I made a copy. But I'm not keeping the original anymore. Where are you taking it? I glanced at her, hesitated, then said, Brian's office? Tonight. Sandra frowned. You sure that's smart? Smart left the room when they decided I wasn't family anymore. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She knew better. As I slid the folded paper deeper into my purse, a message flashed across my lock screen. From Lisa. No subject. No preview text. I tapped it open and froze. I didn't read Lisa's message again. I didn't need to. It was only 5 words. Let's not make this worse. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering, heart still. Then I locked the phone, grabbed the envelope, and walked out to the car. Sandra didn't try to stop me this time. She just said, "Drive safe," and watched me pull away like I was headed towards something that might burn. The sky was low and gray, the kind of fall afternoon that made everything look like an old photograph. I took the long way, not for drama, not to stall, but because I needed those extra 10 minutes to breathe, to remember who I was before I became the problem in their story. When I turned down Hawthorne Drive, I felt my stomach tighten. Their house looked the same from the outside. Nothing about the siding or the tidy flower beds hinted at betrayal. I parked at the curb, not in the driveway. One envelope in my purse. One spare key in my coat pocket. I rang the bell. Heard soft movement behind the door. A pause. Then the latch turned. Lisa opened it with a face that looked like it had been carefully arranged. Polite. Controlled. Not warm. Maggie, she said, not Mom. You didn't have to come. I held up the silver key between 2 fingers. Just returning what doesn't belong to me. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Brian's in the kitchen. I walked in like I didn't know the house better than my own. The scent of lemon oil and something roasting in the oven hit me like a punch. Still homey, still familiar, still not mine. Brian stood near the island, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. You didn't get the message? I got it, I said, loud and clear. His jaw tightened. Then why are you here? I looked at the new cabinets, soft close, custom paint, under cabinet lighting. The very ones Ashley had cried over when they'd thought they couldn't afford the renovation. I gave him a small, dry smile. To give back the key and the past. Apparently. Lisa walked to his side but said nothing. Brian ran a hand down his face. You made us feel like we owed you. All the time. Like we couldn't breathe in our own life without wondering what you'd already done behind the scenes. That one landed, sharp and clean. I looked at him, at both of them. You think love is a ledger, I said. It's not. But since you insist, here's one less thing to carry. I pulled the envelope from my purse and placed it on the counter. No dramatics, just gravity. Lisa looked at it but didn't reach. Brian didn't even ask what it was. I took the key from my coat and set it next to the envelope. I won't trap you any longer, I said softly. You're free. Lisa swallowed. Her eyes darted toward the hallway. From somewhere down the hall came the sound of small feet thudding fast across hardwood. Then Emily appeared. Her hair was a mess. She wore socks but no shoes, and her eyes, wide and scared, met mine. Grandma! I forced a smile. Hey, baby. Her eyes filled instantly. You're leaving? I knelt before she could reach me, arms open. She crashed into my chest with a force I wasn't ready for, sobbing. "Don't go," she cried. "Please don't go." I held her tight, eyes shut, my face pressed to her shoulder. This child, this sweet, blameless soul, was the only part of all this I'd miss without hesitation. "I'll always be where kindness is," I whispered into her hair. "Always." Brian shifted. I heard it. The discomfort. The guilt. Lisa's arms were crossed now, tighter than before. I kissed the top of Emily's head and pulled back. "Go on now. They need you." She shook her head. "Emily," Lisa said sharply, but her voice cracked. Reluctantly, Emily pulled away. I stood slowly, my knees stiff, my heart heavier than it had been this morning. I turned to leave, reaching for the doorknob. "Wait," Brian said. I froze. Behind me, Lisa let out a breath like she already regretted what was about to happen. I turned slowly. He wasn't looking at me. Not really. Just past me, as if he couldn't quite meet my eyes. Then he said, "You didn't tell us about the mortgage. Why?" I didn't answer Brian. I just held his gaze for a beat too long, then turned the knob and walked out. Some truths aren't owed on demand, especially not to people who just voted you out of their life by group consensus. The air outside had shifted, windier now, that brittle kind of fall breeze that sweeps up dead leaves like it's trying to clean the world. By the time I pulled into the bank parking lot, the clouds were beginning to bunch at the edges, heavy and expectant. First Savings was a squat brick building that hadn't changed much since I was young enough to need a parent's co-signature. It still smelled like printer toner and lemon polish. The fake plant near the front desk still leaned a little too far to the left. Paul was at the counter, glasses down on his nose, same gray cardigan he always wore when the temperature dipped below 65. When he saw me, he smiled. Not the professional kind, the old friend kind. "Well," he said, pushing up his sleeves, "you knew this day might come." I exhaled. It always felt far away, until it didn't. He led me past the teller windows and through the secure door that clicked softly behind us. The back hallway was quiet, carpet muffling our steps. He unlocked a small file room, the kind that hummed with fluorescent light and smelled faintly of dust and ink. From the third drawer down, he pulled a slim gray folder, unlabeled to anyone but us. "I kept it under your maiden name," he said gently, laying it on the table. I nodded. "Time to unseal it." He sat across from me, carefully opening the folder like it might contain something sacred. Inside, one notarized transfer authorization, one sealed deed release, 3 years old, dated and stamped, all waiting for my go. "I wasn't sure," he said, "if you'd ever want to use it." "I wasn't either," I admitted. I ran my fingers along the edge of the document, my name in black ink, clean and confident. Brian's name beneath it, in the transferee box. Everything legal. Everything quiet. "You did this when you paid the house off?" I nodded. "Set it up to revert back to me if the account ever defaulted again." Paul let out a slow whistle. "You were covering your exit even while you were saving their necks." "No," I said. "I was covering my options. That's different." He looked at me, really looked, the way someone does when they finally realize you've been playing a longer game than they thought. "You want me to initiate the transfer?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "Just have it ready. Don't say anything. Don't move a dime until I call." He closed the folder carefully and tucked it under his arm like it was a fragile artifact. "You're owed more than money, Maggie," he said softly. "You know that, right?" I gave a small smile. "I'm not owed anything." I just want the timing. He didn't press. Some people don't need the whole story to understand the weight of silence. I thanked him and left the same way I came in. The air outside was cooler now, the wind rising. A drop of rain hit my cheek as I stepped off the curb. Then another. Then a quiet, steady drizzle that made everything shimmer. I didn't rush to the car. Instead, I stood there for a moment, face turned up, letting it fall. The soft sting of cold on skin. The kind of rain that doesn't ask for shelter. Perfect weather for cleansing, I said aloud, to no one in particular. The clouds cracked with a distant rumble. I pulled out my phone and opened the message thread with Brian. Still unread. But just as I moved to put it away, a new message popped in. This one from a name I hadn't seen in over a year. Ashley. 3 words. We need to talk. Maggie discovers she legally owns Brian and Ashley's house through a private LLC she established years earlier. The rain hadn't let up by morning, a slow, steady rhythm against the kitchen window that felt almost like punctuation. Every few minutes, I caught myself staring at my phone, waiting for Ashley's message to make sense. We need to talk. About what? Guilt? Gratitude? Or something worse? Realization. Sandra showed up again, umbrella in one hand, thermos in the other. You didn't sleep? She said, before even taking off her coat. Didn't need to. She poured herself coffee, studying me. That tone you use? It's the one right before you make a move. I just need to see Paul again, I said, reaching for my keys. Her eyebrows lifted. Already? Something about those papers, I murmured. There was a line I didn't notice before. The drive was gray and slick, the kind of morning that blurs edges, sky into pavement, reason into impulse. Paul was behind his desk when I walked in, a faint smile fading when he saw my face. Back so soon? I need to see the file again. He hesitated only a second before unlocking the cabinet. All right, he said, sliding it across. But Maggie. I know, I interrupted. It's delicate. I laid the documents flat. One by one, I read every clause, every date, until my eyes stopped on a small typed line at the bottom of the deed release. Beneficiary, MD Holdings, LLC. I frowned. Paul, what's this? He sighed, the kind that carries history. You remember when we set it up? You asked me to create a holding company so the payoff wouldn't be traceable to you directly. Said you didn't want family politics tangled in it. The words hit like cold air. So the LLC owns the lien? Owns the lien, he confirmed quietly. And when the mortgage was cleared, that lien converted into ownership. Title transferred automatically 3 months later. I blinked, my voice low. You're saying I don't just own the loan, I own the house. Paul nodded. Legally, yes. The deed lists MD Holdings as title holder. You are MD Holdings. I sat back. It took a moment for the weight of it to settle. Every wall I'd helped them build, every brick they believed was theirs, already belonged to me. So every wall I helped them build already belongs to me, I said aloud, barely above a whisper. Paul folded his hands. You have the choice, Maggie. Mercy or lesson. The rain outside pressed harder, as if waiting for my verdict. Mercy, I repeated. They didn't give me that. He gave a small, sad smile. That's not the same as deserving it. The office door creaked. Sandra leaned in, damp from the rain, her timing uncanny as always. You told me you just talked to Paul, she said, glancing between us. Now what's this about choices? Paul looked to me for permission. I nodded. He explained in careful terms the ownership, the transfer, the LLC. Sandra's eyes widened halfway through, then narrowed into something sharper. You could evict them, she said slowly. I could, I said. Or you could forgive them. I could. She studied my face, voice low. Don't burn bridges, just turn the lights on. I turned to her, calm now. I'm not burning, I said. I'm illuminating. There was silence then, thick but electric. The kind of quiet before lightning decides where to strike. Paul slid the folder back toward me. Whatever you decide, Maggie, document it. Don't make it emotional. Emotional? I almost smiled. That part's done. I slipped the folder into my bag, the papers cool against my hands, heavier than any weapon I'd ever carried. As I stood, the rain tapered into a mist, sunlight barely ghosting through the clouds. I could feel the shift inside me. Not rage, not righteousness. Clarity. Sandra followed me to the door, still uncertain. Where are you going now? I looked out toward the parking lot, where my car glistened like something newly washed clean. Home, I said, to write the truth down before anyone else tries to. I opened my umbrella and stepped into the silver light. Behind me, Paul's voice carried just enough to reach the door. Be careful, Maggie. Reckonings have long memories. I didn't turn around. The umbrella tilted slightly in the wind. And for the first time in days, I smiled. It wasn't vengeance I felt rising. It was ownership, literal and otherwise. 3 weeks passed. Enough time for fall to settle in, for the leaves to curl and brown, for apologies that never came. The silence from Brian and Lisa was complete. Like I'd been neatly edited out of the family narrative. No texts, no calls, not even a comment when Sandra posted a photo of the two of us having lunch at Leona's. They'd ghosted me with surgical precision. And then, the invitation arrived. It came to my inbox on a gray Wednesday afternoon, sandwiched between an Amazon receipt and a reminder to schedule my flu shot. Subject line, neighborhood mixer at our home, sat 3 p.m. The sender, Emily's school email. Accidental forward, probably meant for her teacher's list. The body of the message was short, chirpy, self-satisfied. We're thrilled to open our doors to neighbors and friends, a celebration of community, growth, and gratitude, food, drinks, live music, and a tour of our newly remodeled home. Hope you can stop by? Beneath that was a photo. Lisa holding a mimosa, beaming in front of their newly painted front door. Captioned, Our home, our success, our story. Sandra saw it first. She'd been reading over my shoulder, as she often did when I pretended not to mind. Oh, now that's divine comedy, she muttered, pouring herself a second cup of tea. The gall. Hosting a party on land they technically don't own, and bragging about it. I didn't answer right away, because a part of me wanted to delete it. Let it slide into the digital void where all ignored things go. But another part, the part that had stopped asking for permission, was already imagining the look on Lisa's face when I stepped onto the porch. Uninvited, unwelcome, undeniable. I'm going, I said. Sandra choked on her tea. To that? I nodded. They don't even know they sent it to you. Exactly. She studied me, cautious now. You're not going to make a scene, are you? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I picked up my phone and tapped Paul's name. He answered on the second ring. Maggie? I need the updated records, I said. Everything. Title, deed, tax status. Can you have it ready by Saturday morning? A beat of silence on the other end. Then, you're making it official. I'm making it visible. He sighed. Do you want it notarized? Yes. 3 copies. Sandra raised an eyebrow as I ended the call. You really going to flash title papers at a cocktail mixer? I'm not flashing anything, I said. I'm just attending. She narrowed her eyes. This isn't like you. It's exactly like me, I replied. The me they always misunderstood. The one who showed up, cleaned up, picked up the slack, and never asked for credit. And now? I set my mug down carefully. Now I just want a front row seat to the play. Every play needs an audience, Sandra said, dry. I met her gaze. Exactly. Saturday came colder than expected, the kind of cold that makes even new coats feel insufficient. I wore the navy wool one, the one Brian had once said made me look intimidating in a good way. It still fit. The neighborhood was already dotted with SUVs and minivans by the time I parked. Laughter carried from the backyard. Music, too. Something acoustic and benign. A fire pit crackled in the distance. Someone had set up string lights. I walked up the path like I belonged there. Because legally, I did. Lisa opened the door. She wasn't expecting me. I saw it in the flash of surprise before her hostess instincts kicked in. Her smile stiffened. Maggie. Not Mom. Didn't realize you got the invite. I didn't. I stepped past her into the entryway. But Emily did. She must have hit forward. Lisa blinked, recalibrating. Well, you're here now. Seems that way. The house was staged like a magazine spread. Candles burning, cheese board arranged in perfect symmetry. Guests milled, wine glasses in hand, admiring every corner of the renovation. The cabinets, the paint, the imported tile I'd contributed to with zero fanfare. Brian spotted me from across the room, eyes narrowing just slightly. He didn't approach. Sandra had offered to come, to be backup, but I said no. This part needed to be done alone. I stayed 30 minutes, just long enough for Lisa to mention to a small circle of neighborhood mothers how proud they were to finally call this place ours. Just long enough to hear Brian joke about clawing our way up, and just long enough to set a copy of the deed, folded in thirds, sealed in a plain white envelope, under their monogrammed welcome sign. Before I left, I stepped out onto the porch one last time. From the sidewalk, I heard Lisa call after me. Maggie, wait, what is this? I turned, calm as still water. Read it after the guests leave. You'll want privacy. I walked back in just before 4, 30 minutes after I'd left the envelope. This time, I didn't knock. I opened the front door with the grace of someone who belonged, stepped onto the glossy hardwood like I'd never been voted out of the family group chat, and let the conversation dip 2 degrees as guests caught sight of me. Heads turned, murmurs fluttered, subtle but sharp, the kind of whispers people pretend not to whisper. I didn't look left or right. I just walked in, elegant and silent, the same way I'd entered hospitals, fundraisers, and parent-teacher conferences for years. Composed, unreadable, polite, only when it served me. Lisa was by the bar cart. Her face froze mid-laugh when she saw me. I caught the stutter in her step, the moment her posture straightened, like she'd just heard her full name called in a quiet room. I thought you said she wasn't coming, she hissed at Brian. I wasn't meant to hear it. I did anyway. Brian spotted me, forced a host's smile for the sake of appearances, and excused himself from a group of neighbors I didn't recognize. He didn't come toward me, though. Not yet. He just hovered, jaw tight, watching. I didn't give him the satisfaction of direct contact. Instead, I let my eyes wander over the living room like a gallery patron surveying familiar work. The mantel, I'd sourced the reclaimed wood for it myself. The dining table, maple and heavy, bought from an estate sale I'd driven 2 hours to attend when Lisa mentioned she wanted something authentic. The backsplash in the kitchen, my idea, my checkbook. Every corner of the house was a quiet monument to choices I'd made and money I'd moved behind the scenes. They'd made it look magazine-ready, sure, but the bones of it? That was me. I circled toward the hallway, where I knew the family portraits hung, the curated ones. Lisa in her ivory blazer, Brian in something that passed for a smile. Emily caught mid-spin in a choreographed candid. I stopped in front of them, the closest I'd ever get to being back inside the frame. "Grandma?" The whisper was soft, tugging. Emily stood just behind me, half hidden by the archway. She had a piece of folded paper clutched in her hand like a secret too important to hold alone. I knelt slightly and she pressed it into my palm. I opened it there on the spot. No ceremony needed. "I miss you. I don't know why you're not here anymore." The handwriting was hers, crooked, careful. I felt something tighten low in my chest, like grief pretending to be resolve. I looked up at her. "The truth always finds its way home," I said gently. She nodded like she almost understood. I gave her hand a soft squeeze, then tucked the note into my coat pocket. Behind her, I saw Lisa moving toward us with purpose, Brian trailing close behind, jaw set. Before they could reach me, I heard the click of the front door. Paul walked in. No coat, just a charcoal blazer, a gray scarf neatly looped around his neck, and a leather folder tucked beneath one arm. He looked more like a lawyer than a banker today. He didn't make a scene, just nodded to me once. Message received. Lisa spotted him at the same time I did and paused mid-step. Her eyes dropped to the folder. Her smile, brittle and practiced, flickered for a half-second. Brian's mouth twitched like he was about to speak, but he didn't. I turned to face them both. "I see you got my envelope," I said. Lisa blinked. "You brought a witness?" "No," I said. "I brought documentation." Paul stood beside me now, silent but steady. I didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. I let the weight of the moment do the talking. "Do you want to handle this here?" I asked, "or somewhere more private?" Lisa's cheeks flushed, her voice low and sharp. "You wouldn't dare." I tilted my head. "I haven't done anything, yet." And then, from behind us, a guest stepped forward. A woman from down the street, half-finished glass of wine in hand. "I'm sorry," she said, confused. "Is something going on?" I turned slightly, keeping my expression neutral. "Oh, just a bit of overdue clarity," I said, calm as ever. "This is, after all, a housewarming party." Paul handed me the folder. I held it, unopened. For now. The quiet reckoning begins, not with rage, but with receipts. The moment hung like wet linen, heavy, waiting. Paul didn't speak, but the folder in my hand might as well have shouted. Lisa's expression flickered again, that desperate tug of war between control and comprehension. Brian stepped forward, placing a casual hand on her elbow, but even he looked paler now, less confident. Still, Lisa pulled herself upright, pasted on her smile, the kind she wore when pretending to like someone's baby name choice. "Well," she said, lifting a half-full flute of Prosecco from the bar. "We're not going to let the mood dip, are we?" She raised the glass higher, her voice sailing over the room. "To new beginnings and independence." The crowd, polite, confused, but obedient, clapped. Lisa tilted her head, eyes landing on me like I was the unscheduled speaker at a wedding. Right, Mom? My eyes met Paul's. He gave the subtlest nod, like we were lining up a cue, the kind you practice once in a mirror, then never say aloud. Paul stepped forward, clearing his throat, gently, but with presence. His voice had that banker's precision, warm, rehearsed, and impossible to ignore. And to gratitude, he said, raising his own glass of sparkling water. For those who made this home possible. A few heads turned. A few people clapped again, uncertain. Lisa let out a small laugh, brittle around the edges. Well, yes, that would be us, she said brightly. It took a village. Paul didn't blink. Actually, he said, slower now, Mrs. Dawson might want to correct that. Silence. It rippled first through the three closest guests, then outward, like a soundless wave breaking over hardwood and hors d'oeuvres. All eyes turned to me. I didn't move for a breath. Then I opened the folder, carefully, cleanly. No dramatics, no raised voice, just the quiet rustle of truth leaving its envelope. I stepped forward, not far, just enough. Laid the deed on the kitchen island like a centerpiece no one had ordered. This house, I said, not looking at Lisa yet, was paid off 3 years ago. Quietly, anonymously. The lien was held under a private LLC, MD Holdings. A pause. I waited for it to sink. I am MD Holdings. Lisa blinked once, twice. The glass in her hand trembled just enough to send a bubble racing to the top. I turned toward the guests, now frozen in a half circle of awkward posture and narrowed eyes. I didn't come here to make a scene, but since I was invited, albeit accidentally, I thought it fair to return what was never acknowledged. Brian stepped in then, voice low, trying to regain control. You're not seriously doing this here, Mom. I didn't do anything, Brian. I'm just letting you enjoy your party, with full understanding of who funded the floorboards beneath your feet. Paul spoke next, calm but with authority. As the bank representative who processed the deed, I can confirm the title has been under Mrs. Dawson's holding company since final payment. As of today, she retains all legal rights to the property. There it was. The sound of breath leaving Lisa's lungs. Sharp. Ragged. She stared at me, voice barely more than a hiss. You planned this. I met her eyes, steady. No. I preserved it. Emily stood at the edge of the room now, holding her note-crumpled hands behind her back, her face tight with confusion. I didn't look at her. Not yet. I turned back toward the guests, many of whom were now glancing awkwardly at their shoes or their wine glasses. I have no interest in eviction. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for clarity. I picked up the deed again, folded it once more, and tucked it back into the folder. You're not living in a castle you built from nothing, I said softly. You're living in my gift. Lisa looked like she might drop the glass. Brian had stopped pretending. And still, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I simply walked to the front door again. Before I opened it, I turned back one final time. Enjoy your home, I said. It's yours to maintain now, in every way. Then I stepped out, into the cold October dusk, the door swinging shut behind me. But as I walked to my car, I felt my phone buzz in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. A text from Emily. Can I come over? I didn't intend to create a spectacle. I'd come to say my piece and leave. But once the deed touched the marble, something in the room tilted. The silence wasn't still. It shifted, swelled. Then came the gasps. First one, sharp and involuntary, then another. Like someone had opened a window and the air had finally found an exit. I heard a phone chime. Then the unmistakable whisper click of a camera. A man in a sport coat. I think he was Brian's old law school friend. Had lifted his phone and started recording, his hand not even subtle about it. Lisa's head snapped toward him. "Are you seriously filming this?" she hissed, voice quivering, tone a half step from panic. He lowered the phone but didn't stop the video. "This is private," she said louder now. "This is family." But it was too late. The air had shifted, and the performance she'd been curating all evening was slipping. "That's impossible," Lisa said suddenly, turning back to the deed like it might rearrange itself if she stared hard enough. Her laugh was clipped, breathless. "We paid. We made every payment." Paul cleared his throat, calm but not soft. "You made payments, yes. But they were routed through a servicing company your mother owns. She covered the remaining balance quietly, through quarterly contributions disguised as overpayments." Lisa blinked fast. "You're saying she paid off your mortgage," Paul finished. All eyes turned back to me. Brian looked stunned. His mouth opened once, closed, then opened again, like words were waiting their turn in a line of disbelief. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked finally. Not angry. Not yet. "Just small. Hurt, maybe." I took a breath. "Because telling you would have turned it into a transaction. Gratitude spoken out of obligation isn't gratitude at all." Lisa let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a scoff and a sob. "You're punishing us," she said. "You waited to humiliate me, here, in front of everyone." "No," I said. "I waited for a moment when you might finally hear me." A ripple of whispers circled the room now. A huddle of women near the cheese board, one of the cousins exchanging a glance with her husband. The guests didn't know where to look. They hovered by the edges of the kitchen, glasses in hand, caught somewhere between politeness and voyeurism. Brian ran a hand through his hair. Jesus, this is too much." Paul nodded once, diplomatic but resolute. "You have every right to feel overwhelmed. But the facts are clear." Lisa crossed her arms, her jaw clenched like she could will the room into reversal. "So this was a setup? You waited until the party to drop your little truth bomb?" "I waited for an invitation," I said, voice steady. "It just happened to come with Prosecco." A soft laugh escaped from someone near the hallway, then quickly died. Emily stood near the living room entrance now, hands still tucked behind her back, eyes flitting from face to face. She looked smaller than usual, unsure, like she didn't know who the adults in the room really were anymore. Lisa caught sight of her and pointed a finger at me. "You put her in the middle of this." "I didn't involve Emily in anything," I replied. "She reached out to me." Another silence fell, deeper somehow. Brian's voice cut through it, this time louder, aimed like a blade. "You knew she was behind this?" Lisa didn't answer right away. Her expression flickered again, that same tug of war I'd seen earlier. "No," she said eventually. "Of course not." But her eyes darted toward Emily. And Emily, bless her brave little heart, didn't flinch. The room was breaking now. Not loudly, but visibly. One couple slipped their coats on. Another woman took her purse from the coat rack and mouthed, "Thank you," to no one in particular. This wasn't just awkward anymore. It was exposure. Lisa reached out suddenly and tried to grab the folder off the island. I stopped her hand, gently but firmly. "This stays with me. You can't just come in here and rewrite history." "I'm not rewriting anything," I said. "I'm finally reading it out loud." Paul stepped forward then, not toward me, but toward the center of the kitchen, placing himself physically between Lisa and the rest of the guests. I suggest we end the evening here, he said calmly. For everyone's comfort. Lisa turned on him. You don't get to decide that. I don't, Paul said, still calm. But people are already leaving. And they were. I looked toward the door. Emily was already halfway to it. She paused, then turned back. Her voice, clear and careful, cut across the room. Grandma, she said, can I go home with you? The next morning, the knock came before the coffee finished brewing. I'd barely slept. Not out of regret. There wasn't any. But from the echo of too many silences in too short a span, the kind that linger in the walls after everyone's gone home, like smoke from a candle someone forgot to blow out. I opened the front door to find Brian standing on my porch, still in yesterday's button-down. Wrinkled now, sleeves rolled halfway up like the night had worn him down. His eyes were bloodshot, either from liquor or from whatever hit him once the guests started talking. Do you have a minute? He asked. I stepped aside. He walked in without waiting for permission. He didn't sit. Just paced the edge of the rug in that agitated way I remembered from his teenage years, when the SAT scores came in lower than expected, or when Lisa wouldn't call him back during their first breakup. They're calling it the toast heard around Oak Ridge, he said, laughing dryly. Someone uploaded a clip to Facebook. 500 comments in under 12 hours. You should read them. Actually, don't. I didn't reply. I just folded my arms, waiting. He turned to face me, eyes flaring. You humiliated us? I blinked once. No. I revealed ownership. The truth did the rest. His hands curled into fists at his sides, not in anger toward me, I could see that, but in the flailing grasp of someone realizing the ground they'd stood on was borrowed. You could have done it privately. I tried. For years. He flinched. A beat of silence passed between us, the kind that remembers. Then, softer. They're saying I let my mother buy my life, that I let Lisa play queen in a house we didn't even own. I never wanted a throne, Brian. I just wanted acknowledgement. His shoulders sagged. I can't fix Lisa. I didn't ask you to. He stepped closer. Then tell me what you want. Because she's unraveling, and Emily, she won't even look at her. I need to know where this ends. I considered him, my son, grown and lost and standing in my foyer like he didn't quite know who he was without the story Lisa built around them. I'm not here to hurt you, I said quietly. But I won't let you rewrite this again either. He looked down at the floor, then back at me. Are you going to evict us? I'm not cruel, I said. But I am conditional. His eyes sharpened. Meaning? Meaning you have 30 days to decide if you want to live in that house as family or as tenants. His jaw worked silently, like the word tenant had slapped him. And if I say tenant? Then we sign a lease, and you pay market rate starting next month. And if I say family? Then we have a different conversation, one that starts with honesty and respect. He swallowed hard. The kind of swallow that meant pride was burning its way down. I'll talk to Emily, he said quietly. She doesn't hate you. I never thought she did. He nodded slowly, then turned to leave. His hand hovered over the door handle before he turned back one more time. What happens to Lisa? I didn't answer right away. She has her mirrors, I said. Let her look. He left without another word. When the door clicked shut, I walked back to the kitchen, poured the coffee that had gone cold, and stood at the sink as the morning sun caught the edge of the folder I'd laid on the counter last night. It hadn't moved, but my phone buzzed a second later. A new message from an unfamiliar number. You made a mess, but maybe that's what it takes to clean the house. No name, Just a period at the end, like a warning or an invitation. 2 days passed. The clip had made it off Facebook and onto a local gossip blog, nestled between a zoning dispute and a bake sale recap. The headline was smug and cruel. The house always wins, and this time it was Mom. I hadn't spoken to Brian since that morning on the porch. Emily had stayed one night with me, then quietly asked to go back home. I didn't press. Children, even grown ones, often circle back to the parent who needs them most, if only to keep the seams from splitting. But I knew something was unraveling across town. I could feel it in the stillness of my phone, the kind of silence that comes when people have something to say, and haven't yet figured out how to say it without swallowing pride. Then, late that afternoon, Emily appeared on my doorstep, cheeks red, breath quick from either running or crying. Maybe both. I didn't ask. I opened the door wide. She wrapped her arms around my waist and didn't speak for a full minute. Then, muffled into my sweater. "They're screaming again. She threw a vase. He told her it was just a lease. She said it was betrayal." I ran a hand down her back, slowly. "Okay. You're safe now. She said you were trying to control them." She looked up at me then, eyes searching. "Are you?" "No," I said softly, "but I won't be erased by them either." Emily nodded, then leaned back against the wall, legs tucked up under her like a child again. "They forget, sometimes, that you're the one who raised him." "Adults do that," I said. "Especially when they've built their story on sand. They get mad at the waves." A quiet knock on the back door pulled us both from the moment. It was Paul, polite as ever, his tie slightly crooked, his mouth pulled into a tired half smile. "Thought I'd check in," he said. "I just left their house. Brian tried. Lisa," he sighed, "she won't sign." I closed my eyes. Not surprised? Not anymore. "She said what?" I asked. "She said signing would be admitting defeat. Said you made her look like a fool and she won't compound it by putting her name on paper like a tenant in a basement apartment." "So she'd rather lose the house." Paul shrugged. "They're choosing pride over a roof." "Then pride will have to keep them warm." His expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker behind it. Respect, maybe, or grief. "I assume you'll move forward?" he asked gently. "I already have." I reached toward the manila envelope on the side table. Inside was the first notice. Clean, quiet, without malice. A line drawn with care, but a line, still. Paul nodded. "You warned him gently. That's mercy." I didn't say anything for a while, just looked out the window, past the hedges that needed trimming, past the swing Emily used to dangle from like a little gymnast, back when the world felt smaller and easier to control. "I just wanted the truth in the open," I said. "I didn't want to burn the house down." "Then don't light the match. Just hand them the water and let them choose." From the living room, Emily called softly. "Can I stay another night?" I turned toward her, managing a smile. "Of course, honey." Paul waited a beat before speaking again. "You're doing the right thing, even if it doesn't feel like it yet." He left shortly after, his quiet footsteps carrying more weight than his words. Once the door shut behind him, I stood still for a long time. Long enough for the sun to slip behind the neighbor's trees, long enough for the lights in the kitchen to feel too bright. Then I sat at the table, unfolded the eviction notice, and signed it. Not with anger, not with triumph, just with the kind of resolve you earn the hard way, when love stops being soft and starts having edges. And as I slipped the form into its envelope, my phone buzzed again. Same number, same clipped tone. "You drew the line. Now wait for who crosses it." No name, just those words. and the sound of Emily humming, softly, from the next room. The courtroom wasn't grand. It smelled faintly of old carpet and paper dust, the kind of municipal space that holds more bureaucracy than drama. Still, when Lisa walked in with her lawyer, tall, stiff, and looking every inch the kind of man who measured dignity by the billable hour, the air in the room shifted. She was dressed in navy, hair pinned, lips set, like she'd walked into a board meeting instead of a hearing. Brian followed 2 steps behind, shoulders hunched in his blazer like a boy wearing his father's coat. I didn't stand when they entered. I didn't even blink. Paul sat beside me at the petitioner's table, calm and precise, fingers laid flat on a folder labeled with my trust's name, the same one that held the deed, the transfers, the silent decade of support Lisa had now decided to rewrite. The clerk called the matter. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched low and a no-nonsense tone, wasted no time. Lisa's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, we contend that the title transfer is fraudulent. My client had no knowledge of her mortgage being paid off by an undisclosed holding company, which we've only now learned was managed by her mother. There was no transparency, no consent. No consent? Paul interrupted, voice firm but polite. Respectfully, Your Honor, we have a full record of mortgage statements, bank transfers, and acknowledgement of receipt by the lender, all signed and time-stamped. He slid the folder forward, opening it to reveal the trail. Each overpayment made under MD Holdings was traceable. The bank processed them. The trust is listed as title holder. Every quarterly statement matches. There is no fraud, only selective memory. The judge flipped through the documents, her eyes scanning fast. Lisa leaned toward her attorney, whispering urgently. Her hands trembled slightly. She tried to tuck them beneath the table, but I saw. Brian said nothing. The judge looked up. Everything presented here is valid. Signatures match. Disclosures were mailed to the address on file. Ownership belongs to MD Holdings, and the beneficiary listed is Margaret Dawson. She paused. That's you, Mrs. Dawson? I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Lisa stood abruptly. But I never agreed to any of this. She did it behind our backs. That's manipulation. Emotional control. She paid it off just to hold it over us. The judge raised an eyebrow. You're upset your home was paid off? Without cost to you? And now you want the court to invalidate a legal deed because it makes you uncomfortable? Lisa's breath caught. The courtroom was silent, but for a cough in the back row. The judge closed the file and set her hands neatly on top. You may remain in the property, Mrs. Dawson, or choose to revoke occupancy. It is at your discretion as the sole title holder. Lisa collapsed back into her chair like the words had winded her. I stood slowly. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I'll allow continued occupancy for one person. Lisa's head snapped up. I didn't look at her. I turned to the bench. My granddaughter. Brian's mouth parted slightly, like he wanted to speak but didn't know whose side the words would land on. The judge nodded. Understood. And that was it. The gavel didn't even fall. Just a quiet, unceremonious end, like a door clicking shut after someone walks out for good. I walked past Lisa without looking at her, past Brian, whose eyes followed mine but never met them. In that moment, they looked less like a couple and more like 2 people who had both lost the argument, but only one knew why. Outside, the afternoon was crisp, leaves skimming across the courthouse steps. Paul caught up beside me. You sure about that? He asked. Yes, I said. He waited a beat. She won't go quietly. I didn't ask her to. I turned my phone on as we walked to the car. A new message waited. You chose one. Let's see who chooses you back. Still no name, but I knew who it wasn't from. The courthouse air still clung to me, that dry, recycled chill that smelled like tension and toner. By the time I reached Paul's office, the sun was already low, pouring long, honey-colored stripes across the glass of his desk. He was still in his suit from the hearing, jacket draped over the chair, sleeves rolled up. The folder from court sat open before him, its contents neatly stacked as though order alone could soothe what had just unfolded. He looked up when I entered. "I thought you'd go home," he said. "I did," I replied, closing the door behind me. "But it doesn't feel like home anymore. Not until I finish something." Paul gestured for me to sit. "You won, Maggie. You can breathe now." I shook my head. "Winning's just another kind of noise. I don't want noise. I want closure." He leaned back slightly, cautious. "What are you thinking?" I slid a new envelope across the desk, my name already signed across the tab in neat black ink. "This," I said. "A revision." He opened it carefully, the way a man opens a letter from the past, and began scanning. His brow furrowed halfway through. "You're transferring half the property," he said slowly, "into a new trust. For Emily?" I nodded. "She'll inherit the deed when she turns 21. No contest, no reversal, no family interference. A clause that locks it all in place." Paul looked up from the papers. "You're skipping a generation." "That's the point," I said. "Let kindness inherit directly. Let the next one start clean." He sat quietly for a moment, the tick of the desk clock filling the space between us. "That's bold," he said finally. I smiled faintly. "Boldness raised the ungrateful. Gentleness will raise the wise." He studied me then, not like a client, but like someone trying to understand the shape of another person's forgiveness. "You're sure?" he asked. "Once this is recorded, there's no undoing it. You're giving up control." "I had control," I said. "And look what it made of them. Control feeds pride. Legacy feeds gratitude. I'm choosing the latter." Paul nodded slowly, as if weighing the balance between justice and grace. "Emily will have a foundation," he said. "She'll have more than that," I replied. "She'll have a story that doesn't come wrapped in resentment. She'll know her grandmother believed in her enough to let her start fresh, without all our bruises stitched into the deed." He turned to the last page. "Initial here," he said softly, sliding the pen toward me. The pen felt heavier than it should have, not from the ink, from the intent. I signed. My hand didn't shake. When I set the pen down, something loosened in my chest that hadn't since the day I'd written the first check to save that house. Back then, I thought I was buying peace. Now I understood I was purchasing silence, the wrong kind. Paul gathered the papers neatly, clipping them together. "I'll file this tomorrow morning." "Tonight," I corrected gently. "Let's not give regret overnight to think." He smiled just a little. "You really are done, aren't you?" "I think," I said, standing. "I'm finally beginning." Outside, the sky was deepening into that soft violet hour. The in-between where everything looks both wounded and whole. I could see my reflection in his office window, faint but clear. Older, yes. Tired, definitely. But not bitter. As I turned to leave, Paul called out, "You know she'll find out." "I hope she does," I said. "Maybe she'll finally understand what generosity looks like when it isn't asking to be thanked." I stepped into the hall, the envelope copies tucked under my arm, and exhaled. Really exhaled. For the first time in months. My phone buzzed as the elevator doors slid open. Same unknown number. Legacy built. Now wait for who tries to claim it. This time I didn't feel dread, only clarity. I deleted the message, watched the screen go dark, and whispered to my reflection in the brushed metal. Some gifts aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to end cycles. And for the first time, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like release. The U-Haul showed up on a Thursday morning, not a moving company. That would have required admitting there was something worth wrapping in bubble wrap. No, this was a rental truck, driven by Lisa herself, with her sister Rhonda in tow and two high schoolers she'd clearly paid in pizza and awkward silence. I watched from across the street as they loaded the last of her curated life into boxes marked kitchen, Lisa's, and office, vision board. She never looked toward my house. Not once. Her pride had packed itself months ago. Now it was just collecting the physical pieces. Sandra appeared beside me at the porch rail, a cup of chamomile in one hand and a quiet sort of knowing in her eyes. "Well," she said, "there goes the last of the scented candles and tension." I didn't smile, but something in me did unclench. Across the street, Brian stood on the lawn, not helping, just watching. Lisa gave him one last look, a tired, disappointed sweep, before climbing into the passenger seat and slamming the door shut. The truck pulled away without fanfare, its rumble fading like an old argument finally running out of air. He didn't come over right away. But that evening, just before dusk, he showed up on the edge of my back garden with a paint-streaked shirt and hands that looked like they'd finally done something useful. "Started fixing the gate," he said, voice low, "and the side fence. Hinges were rusted through." I nodded. "They've been that way for years." "I know." He kicked at the gravel with the toe of his boot. "I'm sorry it took this long." "Me too," I said. But I didn't close the door. He didn't ask to come in, just turned and walked back toward the house. The one that finally looked like someone earned it. Emily came by later, backpack slung over one shoulder, a sketchbook in the other. She was humming again, not to fill space, just to live in it. She stayed for dinner, helped me chop zucchini, drew a bluebird on the corner of the grocery list pad. "I sleep better here," she said, her voice casual. "But Dad's trying. I think it helps that it's his hands fixing things now, not yours." I said nothing, just touched the back of her head lightly, like I used to when she was too young to notice. She didn't ask about her mother. She didn't need to. That weekend, I reopened the garden. Nothing official. No flyers, no open house. Just unlocked the gate, moved the tools back into their hooks, and left the sign that once read, "Closed for family emergency," turned back to welcome. Gently. A few neighbors trickled in. One brought fresh lemons. Another left a pie on the bench under the fig tree. A pair of teenage girls asked if they could use the bench swing for a podcast. By Sunday, laughter had returned. Not loud, but present. Sandra stopped by with her usual blunt grace, tucking a folded newspaper under her arm. "You know," she said, leaning on the porch rail, "I used to think you were too soft on them." "I was," I replied. "And now they say you destroyed them." She shrugged. "Funny how people confuse accountability with cruelty." I looked out at the garden, the fresh lines in the soil, the stubborn marigolds pushing up where they shouldn't. "I didn't destroy them," I said. "I disciplined them." Sandra nodded. "You didn't raise weak people, just proud ones." "A good mother teaches," I murmured. "A great one lets the lessons echo." She raised her cup. "To the echo, then." We clinked mugs without ceremony. Across town, Lisa had moved into a condo above a Pilates studio, according to the gossip. The HOA didn't allow porch furniture or wind chimes. I imagined her adjusting. The town never said anything outright. Polite people rarely do. But they stopped crossing the street when I walked past. They started waving again. Some even brought seeds for the community beds. No apologies, just presence. And sometimes, presence is the loudest kind of apology there is. That night, after Emily had gone back to Brian's with a plate of leftovers and a bag of basil, I sat at my kitchen table and found myself staring at a folded slip of paper I hadn't opened yet. It wasn't a text. It was from the mailbox. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single line, handwritten in sharp, looping pen. Inheritance is a mirror. Be sure you like what it reflects. For the first time, I wasn't sure who sent it, but I knew exactly what it meant. The morning was still. Not the kind of stillness that comes from emptiness, but the kind earned after weather, after wind and shouting and slammed doors. This stillness was clean, forged. I sat on the porch with a mug I'd had since the year Brian was born. The glaze had chipped. The handle wobbled slightly, but I kept it because it held heat longer than the newer ones. Some things earned their place by surviving. The fields across the road were bathed in that soft amber light that only showed up once the air had cooled for good. The season had shifted. You could feel it in your joints before you saw it in the trees. I didn't hear the footsteps at first, just the light patter of sneakers and breathless energy rounding the corner. "Grandma!" Emily skidded to a stop at the base of the porch, cheeks flushed from the run, ponytail messy, eyes bright. She held something behind her back, like it was a secret about to burst. I raised an eyebrow. "You're up early. I wanted you to have this before breakfast," she said, climbing the steps two at a time. She held out a folded piece of sketch paper, corners crumpled, lines thick with crayon and pencil. At the top, in uneven handwriting, Grandma's house, ours. Below it, a drawing. The porch, the garden, the crooked swing. And us. Two small stick figures, one with glasses and gray hair, the other holding a watering can twice her size. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I looked at her. "Exactly, baby." I tapped the title gently. "Ours." Her smile was the kind that tucked itself behind her teeth. She sat beside me and leaned into my arm, resting her head against my shoulder without a word. I set the drawing on my lap and opened the folder beside me. The deed was still inside, but it didn't feel like a weapon anymore. Just a record of what had already been paid. I folded it gently, not to hide it, just to let it rest. The screen door creaked a moment later. Paul stepped out, holding a second cup of coffee, one he knew I hadn't asked for but would drink anyway. He handed it to me and nodded at Emily. "Early riser," she grinned. "I beat the sun." Paul sat on the top step, legs stretched out, sighing like the weight in his bones had finally started to settle. "You did it your way," he said. I sipped the coffee. Let it warm the parts of me I didn't know were still cold. "I didn't set out to do anything," I said. "I only reclaimed what was already mine." "Still," he said, "you held the line." Emily looked between us like we were speaking a language she half understood. But she didn't interrupt. The wind shifted. The porch chimes, the ones Lisa used to call tacky, sang just enough to remind us they were still there. In the distance, the school bus pulled around the bend. Emily stood quickly, tucking her drawing into her backpack like it was gold. She kissed my cheek, whispered, "Love you," and took off down the walk. I watched her board the bus, waved from the window, and disappeared toward a morning that didn't need fixing. Paul rose slowly. "You want me to file that letter from the mailbox?" he asked, nodding toward the slip of paper I'd left on the side table inside. I shook my head. "No. Let it sit there a while." He followed my gaze out across the fields, hands in his pockets. "She'll hear about Emily's trust eventually," he said. "I hope she does. She won't take it kindly." "She never took kindness well," I said. "But that's not my responsibility anymore." Paul touched the railing gently, like it might give him an answer if he waited long enough. Then he nodded and walked back down the steps, quiet as always. The sun had fully risen now, warm, unapologetic. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, leaned back into the creak of the chair, and looked out over everything that remained. The garden, the swing, the foundation I'd paid for, twice over. Once in dollars, once in resolve. They voted me out, I thought. But you can't evict the person who paid the foundation. And with that, I flipped the porch light off. Day had arrived, and I was still here.